Hello everyone. Speedy turnaround. All hear me okay? Brilliant. Right. A warm welcome to this session. My name is Minnie Moll. I'm the Chief Exec of the Design Council over here. And also, very big thanks WSP, who are sponsoring this particular session. So, diving straight in, we've already spoken quite a bit about skills, but really specifically green skills. And one of the things I've really noted is there's so much talk about green jobs, and I'm really hoping we're going to dig in a bit into what are green jobs and therefore how do we bridge the skills. A couple of stats for you, one from the Construction Industry Training Board, and they suggest that we're going to need 350 green construction jobs needed by 2028. I've been in quite a few roundtables recently talking to people within the energy sector. Just the energy sector alone, the number of jobs to build the wind farms, etc., and all of the infrastructure we need to transition. Energy alone, huge transition, huge need for jobs, huge opportunity. So we're going to dig into this now. I just want to give you one example though about skills, and this is from design. One of the things we do every few years at the Design Council is a big piece of research on the value of the design industry in the UK. Every 3 or 4 years. It's coming out very soon. What I can tell you is, the value we'll announce soon, is that the design sector is 97 billion GVA each year. That's about 3/4 the size of the finance sector. It's way bigger than everyone thinks. And one of the other pieces of research we've done is the number of designers, 1.97 million people in the design sector. Many of them want to design for planet but don't know how. They're SMEs, they didn't study life cycle analysis, materiality, etc. So just taking design as one sector, the absolute need for some very specific skills. And here's why that's important, is that 80% of the environmental impact of any product is determined at design stage. 80% of the impact on the environment is determined at that stage. So we need that 80% to have designers that know what they're doing and are making that a good 80%. So that's just one example picking up there from the design sector. So I'm going to just introduce our panel, and what they're going to do, you've seen the format during the day, they're each just going to, if you like, have a few minutes, 5 minutes max, for their throwdown, their key thoughts on this topic of how we bridge the green skills gap. And you can work out who Kate is. Kate Dougherty, who's head of Net Zero and Sustainability Services. We have Carl here in the blue shirt. Carl is the CEO of Siemens, and he's also the chair of Net Zero Northwest. Down at the end there, we have Dr. Nick Goldspink from N8 Research Partnership, and here with me, Professor Will Swan from the University of Salford. And I'm going to ask you, Kate, go first, please. Give us your headline thoughts on this challenge.
Fantastic, thank you, Minnie. Hi everyone, I'm Kate Dougherty, Technical Director at WSP, and I'm our UK Head of Net Zero Carbon and Sustainability for Building Services. So basically I'm an engineer and I work with my team and with our clients to design net zero carbon buildings, so that's where I'm coming from. My role is UK-wide, but I'm based here in Manchester, which is just fantastic because there is so much opportunity here. There's so much enthusiasm for the transition to net zero carbon in my sector, in my industry. I'm one of those people that came to university in Manchester from elsewhere, and I stayed, because I loved it. And that's that kind of, the opportunities that we have here, I think, are a big part of that, bridging that skills gap and keeping those skills in Manchester. And it was actually the University of Western Australia I was at before then. So, big shoes to fill. So, really to set the scene, obviously, we're going to net zero in the UK by 2050. We've got the 78% of that by 2035. In Manchester, 2038. Of that enormous challenge, 40% of the carbon emissions in the UK are down to the built environment. And that's where the opportunity and the challenge for, you know, my business and my sector comes in. WSP, at WSP, we have made a commitment to reduce the carbon emissions of our designs and advice by 50% by 2030, because that's where we can have the impact, not sort of in our organisation and how we get to and from work. That's important, and we are targeting net zero carbon, but it's those designs and advice and the creativity and the way we work with our clients, that's where we can make that impact, and that's why we've committed to that. So yeah, the clients are really engaging in this agenda at the moment across all sectors, in my experience, in the areas that I work in. It's a huge challenge, but the thing is, in construction, we've got the technical solutions. We really already have those technical solutions. We are delivering on this in our industry. We have the skills in pockets. The challenge now is to scale that. And, you know, just like Minnie said with those figures, we really do need to scale that. And it's that requirement for scaling that underpins this skills gap that we're seeing. So in my line of work, I've absolutely seen a massive uplift in the demand for net zero carbon building design, and it is growing, and it is growing. And it's definitely fair to say that right now, the people and skills to deliver what I need to deliver for my clients are in short supply. They absolutely are. So a lot of my role now has gone from being 100% technical to actually trying to coordinate internally and externally that recruitment and that training and that upskilling that's needed. And it's challenging, but it's a big opportunity and it's exciting space to be in. So as an example, I've been recently holding sort of roundtable discussions within my teams across the country and saying to them, what are the barriers to delivery? What are the skills you need to be able to deliver on net zero carbon? And it's exactly those sorts of things you were talking about, Minnie, the calculations and the whole life cycle carbon pieces that are all, you know, new methodologies that we need to understand. But the big takeaway from me from these discussions with my teams has been the engagement and the enthusiasm from our young generation of engineers. So it's that's kind of really given me a lot of hope in terms of driving this agenda forwards and achieving our 2050 goals, because we've got those enthusiastic young people who are so engaged in this agenda and want these jobs and want these skills and want to drive this forward. Beyond, you know, WSP as an organisation, obviously our whole industry has got a huge role to play in closing that skills gap upstream, you know, to ensure that the pipeline of skills that we need are coming through. And you know, we've got Sandra in the audience and who does a lot of work with schools in the Greater Manchester area, and WSP as a whole, that's kind of echoed. We do a lot of work with schools, partnershiping with universities. We take on summer placements, apprenticeships, just to play our part in that kind of pipeline upstream. Something that I sort of personally want to really specifically pick up on here, though, is diversity in the engineering and construction centre. You know, Minnie, you said you'll know who Kate is. Well, that is the same in every meeting I ever sit in, ever. You always know who Kate is because I'm the only woman in that space. So really specifically attracting more women to the engineering professions is something that's really important to me. Before we even think about net zero carbon and the skills gap to get there, the UK as a whole has got a really significant shortfall in skilled engineers already. And when you consider that 16% of engineering undergraduates are women, 12% of engineering professionals are women, well, it just seems really obvious to me that we are missing out on a huge untapped talent pool there. You know, there's obviously a huge amount of other underrepresented groups in engineering and construction as well that we should be engaging with. So I really believe that this green skills agenda and green skills gap, that's a really big opportunity for us to increase diversity in our sector that so desperately needs it. We've been talking about this is a creative sector that needs creative solutions. To come up with creative solutions, you need diversity of thought and experience in that room when you're coming up with those designs. It's so important. So this drive towards green skills, I think, is that opportunity to engage with those underrepresented groups and talk about careers which they're interesting, they're exciting, they make a difference, you know, and I know that from personal experience. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up, net zero carbon building design, huge increase in demand, absolutely seeing that on the ground. We're already coming up against a skills gap in this space, and it really will grow. It's a massive challenge. As an organisation and as an industry, we have a really important role to play in that, working with schools, educational institutions, etc. But I really am optimistic, and the two reasons I'm optimistic is firstly just that passion and enthusiasm of the young people that I deal with for this space, their ability, I think, to drive this change that we need, and secondly that we've already got this massive pool of untapped potential in our women and those other groups that are not represented in this sector.
Thank you, Kate. And another stat from the upcoming Design Council research, 77% of designers still male, and that includes engineering design, so there is much to do. Carl, can I ask you to pick up the baton?
Thank you very much. So, Carl Ennis. I'm going to do like Kate did and out myself at the start. I'm also an engineer. So I'm also of this place, so I was brought up in Rochdale, and I served my craft apprenticeship in a company that no longer exists there as an engineer, a Whip and Bourne, a switchgear company. So the conversations this morning have been really interesting around the role of apprenticeship and where it can lead you to. I'm lucky to sit here today as the CEO of Siemens in the UK and Ireland. That's I won't go into all the details, but we're quite a large engineering organisation covering energy, healthcare, mobility, industry and the built environment, 16,000 people in the UK. So that's a little bit about my background. In terms of answering the question about what is a green job, I thought it was really interesting this morning that one of the panellists mentioned two types, and I'll talk about the second type first, and it was this conversation around an old adage that I love, the reduce, reuse, recycle adage, right? We always forget that first bit, and it's really interesting that in the energy white paper there's no conversation around energy efficiency, and yet that's the first thing that we all need to address. So the reduce topic. And then the same person went on to talk about the role of digitalisation and the risk to jobs. I'd like to point out that this isn't the first industrial revolution the UK has gone through. And at the time of each of those industrial revolutions, everybody said, oh my God, it's the end of it, what are we all going to do? And guess what? We're significantly better off at the end of it. And I think that's exactly what we'll see with the fourth industrial revolution and the digitalisation of driving efficiencies. It will release us, it will drive the quality of jobs, which was a topic this morning. It will drive that further up. So I don't think that's something to be afraid of. I think that's something to embrace. And if we don't, we will find ourselves behind our European competitors, as indeed we already do. Now then, back to the other area of green for green. I'll talk a little bit about, so there's this question about how do we scale green jobs. Actually, I think we know how to do this. It's about stable planning. It's about a little bit of government seed funding, which pulls in private equity, builds supply chains, and delivers. Now, the role that government have to make in that is market making. As a businessman, I would argue that's the only role I really want them to play, and then to exit stage left and lead us to it. You know, I think that's really, really important. But for that to happen, there have to be government have to make decisions, and I feel that at the moment they're reluctant to make those decisions. I think the North has a wealth of opportunities to really play a big part in this, and we'll talk Hull, whether it be Hull, wind on the Humber, batteries in the northeast, big plants there, hydrogen in the northwest with the HyNet project, or nuclear in Cumbria, where we are overly endowed with opportunities to play our part in decarbonising and delivering great value, high value jobs. I'll talk a little bit about wind because it's often used as that's where it went really, really well, and we, Siemens played a big part in that, and I'm always proud to say that. And then I say quietly, as long as nobody promises to tell anybody else, it's actually a little bit of a failure because we didn't act early enough, and so the supply chain is actually very poor. So our argument, and whenever anybody in government suit is prepared to sit down and listen, is to say act early. You need to make a decision. We're not doing it aggressively enough on hydrogen, and that means we will eventually rely on hydrogen and nuclear, but it might not be developed here, and therefore the good jobs might not be here, and we might be a taker of technology and not a creator and play a part on the world stage. I'll finish by saying a couple of things. We talked about T levels. As an industrial organisation, I find the educational landscape an anathema. I think I'm a pretty smart guy, but I can't work it out. T-levels was a step in the right direction. I'm very supportive of that. And there was also a conversation about levies, and Steve Rotherham mentioned it was a stealth tax. Also quite unusual. I'm a commercial organisation who says I believe in that. I actually think, though, however, what we should do is broaden it and allow it to be used for lifelong learning rather than purely at apprenticeships. As an apprentice, I think it's really important, but actually one of the challenges we have as an organisation is in 10 years' time I'll have 80% of the staff I've currently got, but I'm pretty sure that my business will look pretty fundamentally different, and so I'm going to have to retrain 80% of my staff over the next 10 years. So how do we do that whilst accepting we need to bring in people? And I think at that stage I will leave it.
Fantastic, thank you. And just something to add in here, as an outsider looking in to Manchester, I'm not from Manchester, there is so much that is going on that is positive. And of that 1.97 million people in the designer community, about 400,000 of them are in the north of England and Wales. So there's an enormous amount happening. Nick, the baton over to you.
Thanks. So my name is Nick Goldspink. I'm a Research Partnership Manager for the N8 Research Partnership. We are the strategic collaboration of 8 research-intensive universities in the north of England. About 2 or 3 years ago, just before the pandemic in fact, we became interested in how universities can contribute to the net zero agenda through research and innovation. What can universities do working with business to really drive research and innovation in the green economy in the north of England? We put together a programme which focused on hydrogen and it focused on the rural economy, but we got a lot of feedback from industry that the real challenge was skills. And so we've spent 2 or 3 years speaking with industry, and I'm intrigued by the question of what do we mean by green skills. You can read about a definition of green skills. The Green Jobs Task Force has one that I can't remember because it's quite convoluted. But it's clear that there are 2 types of green skills. There are skills that are needed to perform jobs that will involve new technologies or evolutions of current technologies. So there'll be new technical skills. But it was remarked earlier today, and it's something we've heard a lot from industry, there needs to be a cultural change. Every skill needs to be a green skill. Every skill needs to be thinking about how it can be greener. And I was trying to think of an example of a job that doesn't apply to. And I came to the conclusion that we all use email. Email uses data, data uses energy. You can always send more succinct emails. Discuss the football less. I looked a couple of years ago at how many emails I sent just to our sort of team, which could be done more efficiently. So I can't think of a job that can't be more greener if it really tries. So that for us was quite interesting. And then we got on to so if we're talking about gaps in new technologies, where are those gaps? And again, there were some really good reports. The Green Alliance put a report out, I think in January of this year, the Green Jobs Task Force from last year, both list skills that are needed at a population level. But I think one of the real challenges, and we've probably heard this number today already about the 10,000 heat pump engineers that we need, is that when you talk to FE colleges, they say, well, when we talk to business, nobody's saying we need 10,000 heat pump engineers. They're saying we need 2 or we need 3. So you need to understand and have that granularity at a local level as to what your specific skills needs are. And I'm reminded, of course, that Manchester's done a really good job in thinking about retrofit, and we were involved in some of the early conversations about that. One of the challenges of retrofitting housing is what are the right things to retrofit with. Solar doesn't necessarily work for everywhere. I hesitate to suggest Manchester may not be one of those areas where, unless it rains less than I remember. But things like heat pumps, you need insulation. It needs a particular type of housing. So again, you're looking at specific skills in specific areas. So a generalist approach to delivering skills doesn't work. And again, that's what we've been hearing from business. Not only is it not enough just to say, well, this generalist approach doesn't work. Businesses are at different parts of their journey. Large businesses, and there's one in the Northwest, BAE Systems, have their own academy. They have their own apprenticeship, and I'm sure others do. I don't, Siemens may, they may, yep. Then there are companies, and we've heard from about the Glass Futures program earlier today. We know that we've had conversations where they would love to have their own apprentice, but right now they don't have the critical mass. And then there are SMEs, and I can't remember what the number is, but I think it's either 98 or 99% of the economy is made up of SMEs. They are not large enough to have their own specific programs, so they're reliant on existing provision, whether it be through FE or through online platforms. So how do you address the needs of companies that are all at different scales and all at different points in the journey using a one-size-fits-all solution? So that for me leads into another question of what investment and powers are needed to scale up and deliver. Well, it's flexibility. It's flexibility to change the way that we deliver skills. Some of the combined authorities have devolved skills funding, and if there was somebody from particularly the Northeast LEP here today, they could probably tell some really good stories about some of their schemes, which have much higher rates of employment at the end of them because they are bespoke and designed for industry need. Finally, I'm going to just touch on I had the question put to me, how will skills shortages limit our ability to decarbonise and to move towards net zero? Well, it's going to be enormous, but it's not the only part. According to the Green Alliance report, all sectors are struggling with skills, and the ones that need to decarbonise the most are the ones that are struggling the most. But there's more to it than that. It comes back to this cultural shift. If we had our 10,000 heat pump engineers, what are they going to do? You need homeowners to want to have heat pumps. There's got to be work for them. So in that sense, it's not 10,000 new jobs tomorrow. It's 10,000 people with new skills that evolve over time. So coupled with that, there also needs to be drivers to help homeowners and landlords want heat pumps installing. If we want to support the battery technicians, we need to make sure that the demand for electric cars continues to grow. There's a circular argument here of one of supply and one of demand and finding that right balance. But whether it becomes a virtuous circle or a vicious circle is really the question, and I think that's what we have to answer.
Nice ending. Thank you. Thank you. And finally, Will.
So my name's Will Swan. I'm Director of Energy House Labs. So basically what we do is we look at net zero, low carbon housing, new build and retrofit. And I think there's a really interesting story of, we had a T-level placement because we're interested in schools, we're interested in working with FE. It's something that we see is incredibly important if we're going to scale up the challenge. And the T-level placement came to us and said, no, I'm not really interested in all this because I want to be a bricklayer. Because bricklayers make loads of money. And at the point they said it, a bricklayer, an experienced bricklayer in Manchester is earning pro rata £80,000 a year. However, 9 months before, the UK's largest house builder built what they were going to view as their future house to meet the future home standard, and not a single brick was laid. And I think that kind of gives us an indication of the lack of joined upness between industry and the perception of where we think the jobs are going to be. Because if you think that the young man he was 17 years old, possibly by the time he's in his mid-late 20s, he has a skill that's a heritage skill. Because once the UK's largest house builder stops laying bricks, the rest of them follow. and all of a sudden there's 200,000 houses not being built with a particular skill set. So to me, that's really interesting, because it indicates to me, and I'm kind of an outsider. I'm kind of an outsider from skills, really, because I'm in research and innovation. We do lots of things with industry. So as an outsider, the joins are not very clear, and actually understanding, what we have even as a city region or as a northern powerhouse, what we have in terms of skills, who's delivering what, to what standards, and the joins between, all the different levels, the boot camps, the T levels, the BTECs, the A levels. It must be quite bewildering for learners to engage with, and also to some extent for industry to engage with. So I think I'm probably going to echo some of the things that people say about having this. Net zero is an existential challenge, it's really, really important. And actually, we need to think about that strategically. And universities need to reach down, or across probably is a better expression, to FE, to the skills providers, to the schools, so those conversations can be had. It all needs to be much better joined up, really, from our perspective. And when we're looking, so I look at houses, and houses seem relatively simple, but where are the skills gaps there? So if we're moving away from bricklayers, what we're looking at, manufacturing, modern methods of construction, electrical heating, and digital is a huge gap in the skill set of the house builders. Because actually one of the things we're demanding from homes is they're smart, part of the smart energy system. They have smart car chargers, they have batteries, they have PV. That's actually quite a technical challenge for an industry that's basically been building the same thing for probably 50, 60 years, and probably longer in some aspects of the technology. So that requires actually the employers, the skills providers, the learners to have something that's much more simple and much easier to engage with and much more responsive to the needs of the sector. Because otherwise, if we don't operate like that and don't take net zero as seriously as we might do, what we end up with is a whole series of people with skills that are abandoned, 10 years down the line. And we don't quite know what to do with them, and they're kind of retraining again. So actually making people aware of these changes, when they're young, when they're making choices, and why those choices are changing, so that awareness that Nick was pointing to is that every job is a net zero job. Having that more easy to engage with skills infrastructure, and a skills infrastructure that is more fed in from all sides, actually creates more opportunities for us to get that skill set. Because one of the big challenges of retrofit, we probably build more new houses than we retrofit. And the reason for that is, one, finance and how we finance it, but the other one is skills. And some of those net zero skills are not new skills, they're about measuring things properly and fitting them and installing them properly. So, but understanding that and understanding where those different skills lie, I think, from my point of view, if we want an end state, we have to understand where we are now, where we would like to be, and actually have a more integrated, I think a place is a great way to do this, have a more integrated approach of doing this. Because I think the way that the central government works doesn't kind of meet the needs of places particularly well. So I think, I don't want to see that guy learning a series of skills that he's not going to be able to use and not going to make as much money as he thinks he's going to 10 years down the line. I want them to be future-proofed, and I want them to be part of the solution. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. So let me pick up on one theme that I think's flowed a fair bit during today, and certainly in this session. There is this current disconnect between what businesses need and the education system coming together and being a beautiful match. So who's going to sort that out? Whose job is that? Carl, I'm looking at you first. Who's going to sort that?
I'm not sure it's ever solvable, because I think we're talking there about the building analogy, which I think is a great analogy. You learn a skill now, it's gone. I think that's true of many skills, and I think one of the skills we're going to have to learn is this fact of flexibility, the ability to at some point. I'm lucky enough that I left school at 16, and I've been an engineer, and I won't quite tell you how old I am, but I'm as older than I look. So for quite some time, right? So I've been an engineer. Now, actually, my son has just left school. He's just started university. He's unlikely. He doesn't still quite know what he wants to do, and I'm not convinced him to do engineering, sadly. I know. But whatever he does, it's unlikely he will be in the same industry for the next 40 years. So I think what we're trying to fix perhaps an unfixable problem. For me, the driver is a market, right? And it's a scalable market. You know, so how do you create an environment where you can have, you know, not a fits and starts of home refurbishments, a program of home refurbishments that lasts decades, because by the way, there is more than enough work to do it, right? But there's not a stability of policy, and that's what, and the market has to come first. We keep asked, you know, what skills do you need? That's you know, well, I know the ones I need today, but I don't know what, and nobody knows what we need tomorrow. That's just unknowable. But you know, I can tell you what I need today, and I know that whatever I have, it's probably going to change in the next, you know, 10 years. So I wonder if we're trying to fix a problem that isn't necessarily the problem that we need to fix.
Yeah, I think Kate. Sorry.
So, I was just going to say, absolutely, that point around creating the market and giving those clear signals that then gives businesses and industry the, you know, the confidence to invest in training and upskilling. For me, in my work, it's about legislation, building regulations, policy, you know, planning requirements. All these things need to be consistent, and they need to be ambitious, so that we've got that confidence. If I think back to 10 years ago, I was telling my clients, right, we've got to get ready for net zero carbon. You need to be building net zero carbon homes in 2016 and net zero carbon non-domestic in 2019. Well, then, of course, you know, that never happened, and the confidence is just pulled out. And now I'm trying to have that same conversation, and everyone remembers that very recent history, and it makes it really difficult.
Will, you were going to...
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there are certain skills that do shift and move, and there are certain skills because, you know, a lot of the way we build our homes is not changing. When you look at retrofit, you know, like I go back to that sort of measuring, cutting and installing something, joinery, those kinds of things that are a big part of retrofit, as much as installing an air source heat pump or a battery, or, you know, connecting everything to your smart meter and making an internet of things. So I think the thing is to say that some jobs will be very dynamic and some jobs will disappear, but other jobs are going to be stable, and they're always well, they're certainly going to be there in, well, I want to say my lifetime anymore. They're going to certainly be there in, you know, younger people's lifetimes. So and it's, I think sometimes when you're working in university, the exciting things are the new things, but actually there's some good trades that, you know, a joiner, you know, and plumbing, you know, we're still going to get water moving from one place to another around a house. So those skills still remain, but it's understanding actually what's the direction of travel, because actually plumbing a gas boiler, of which we did 1 million last year, and 30-something thousand air source heat pumps, it changes slightly, but still the principles are the same. So it's understanding that reskilling. I think we have to have some awareness of it. And I would say in housing, I think, you know, big engineering and you know, big commercial buildings do move on in a different way. But actually understanding what that skill set is made up of, and where our gaps are, is an important exercise. It's not an exact science, and it's always going to be perfect. But actually understanding that is quite important. But I absolutely totally agree about policy, stability, the ability of people to invest is 100% right.
I think there's another interesting stat which is pretty good. We can get 80% of our way to net zero with the technology we have today. Right now, as a technologist, I'm disappointed in that, because I'd like us to spend money on new stuff and widgets and gadgets. But the reality is we could do it. So why aren't we doing it? It's back down to Kate's point about policy, stability, and that doesn't create. And back then, someone said, "Oh, well, we can't afford to do this." And I reminded me of the wind. You know, oh, well, we spend billions on. No, the government doesn't spend anything, almost nothing on wind. Right? They seed funded it. They set a standard policy. They put a bit of money in there. It's now actually mainly funded by Canadian pension funds, right? Which is slightly sad, and hopefully it'll be UK pension funds in the not too distant future. But so that money, there is not a shortage of capital. There is not a shortage of capital that wants to invest in green. What it wants is, it wants to know, when I invest it, I'm going to start and it's going to be there in 10 years and 20 years' time. And I'll accept that it's only a small return. I'm not looking to make them, you know, to quit overnight and have made all my money. I will accept low returns, but I need certainty. I need stability.
And just one thing, just picking up on the policy, this is a stat I heard the other day, and this is like, really, this cannot be right, is, you know, it takes a year to build a wind farm, 7 years to get the planning permission.
It's, yep.
And, you know, an example of where the blockers are.
Absolutely.
Blockers are currently. Now, I'm acutely aware of time. I've got to bring us in to land in about 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes. Questions? This gentleman here. Anyone else? And then, lovely, and then one right up at the top there as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Jim Coleman from WSP. I'm a colleague of Kate's. Excellent discussion, excellent points. I've written everything down because it's very, very helpful to the work I do. I think there's a huge challenge around sequencing because the points that are being made about the skills needs and the demand side somehow converging and working out what that sequence is. And we haven't really had to do that in economic development before because we haven't had a target like net zero. And I think that's a huge challenge. Very interested in Carl's point about offshore wind. I completely agree. Very successful on the one hand, but unsuccessful on the other because we did not build the proper value chain. I suppose my key question is, how do we avoid that with hydrogen?
Yeah.
I think that's for you.
Oh, so we're slightly too late, if we're completely honest. And to put it into context, the European Union are spending, I think it was 5 billion on their hydrogen, and we've invested 300 million. So that there is a risk with hydrogen that we will also be behind the curve. And I'm lucky enough to get an audience with Quasi. I'm not sure if that's lucky or not, but I get an audience with Quasi every now and again. And I talked to him. Somebody mentioned it this morning about industrial strategy, and I mentioned that, and he comes out in spots and hives, right? So I say, okay, don't give us an industrial strategy. Can we have a strategy for industry then? And there is lacking that strategy, and the government, bless the cotton socks, are reacting to things, and somehow we need to convince them to get out and say, they say they didn't bet on wind. Of course they bet on wind. Contracts for difference would only have resulted in wind winning. So they just didn't have the fingerprints on it, so they felt good about it. Sometimes politicians have to be prepared to put the fingerprints on something, because that gives confidence.
Thank you. Our next question.
Hi, I'm Melanie On, Deputy Chief Executive at Renewable UK, and I wondered if the panel thought that there was an opportunity for increased cross-sector working on the skills agenda, because as we move forward and see increase, I know the smiles every time you say cross-sector, we try, but increasingly everything's going to be built around electrification. And that means that there will be core skills, and then perhaps where the specialisms you could do bolt-ons, and that's where the flexibility comes in, and then you don't need to worry about the jobs disappearing in 10 years because people have a much broader skill base from the start.
Will, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, it's the answer to that one. I think the thing is actually that you need a balance of skills, particularly if you're sort of over the top of a group of skills people. And so if we think about, so we're actually working on a master's at the moment that has got measuring building performance, circular economy in materials, digital, you know, so all these things are coming together. And I think actually standing over a house 20 years ago and watching it being built and put together and checking it and making sure it's properly commissioned is very different from probably what it's going to look like in 5 years' time. And so actually, there needs to be a recognition that that kind of cross-sector working, because it's about systems, really. It is, you know, and if you go even 10 years ago, and probably still even now, you know, a house hangs off the end, consumes energy. We're moving away from that. And so actually the built environment, M&E, electrical systems, energy systems, engagement with the distributed network operator, all of those things have to be discussed. And actually, if we siloise now, you're kind of not solving the problem. I think it's one of those classic kind of, you know, big building problems, isn't it? You build the fabric and then you sort of over-specify the M&E because of warranties. We actually need to get these systems efficient and making them work. And at a skills level, that means us working together and actually, you know, coming up with joint solutions.
And I think do we have a question up there?
Yeah, I wanted to start off by agreeing with Carl about, you know, whether we're actually addressing the right question, and whether, you know, whether we do need to, whether there really is that skills gap. I'm from the Climate Challenge College in Todmorden. We're running skills-based, vocational-based courses for young people to give them a taster of a range of skills for the future green economy. But I think we've got to be really careful not to decouple skills from knowledge, and I think this is the issue for the bricklayer. We want to make sure that our young people come out with an understanding of what the challenges of climate change are, some of the ways that those can be addressed, and for them to feel empowered rather than terrified at the end of that. And I think if we can do that through our education system, if we can actually give young people a proper understanding of climate change, of where the economy needs to change to meet those challenges, then we've got a way forward. I don't see that in the government's new strategy, the DFE's new strategy paper on the way that climate is going to be taught in schools and in FE from next year onwards. I'd be interested to hear if the panel are equally disappointed as I am, because it seems to be a lot of litter picking and not using single-use plastic straws.
You want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I agree with that professionally and personally. I've got a 7-year-old in primary school, and it bugs me no end that they don't seem to learn anything about the impact of climate change on some of their topic work. But I think it speaks to the need that's been articulated to me for cultural change in the way that everybody thinks about the climate emergency. You know, in some ways, for my generation, you know, that's learnt. You know, that's something we've picked up over the last however long. For me, it's a recent conversion. You know, but if we can start getting into primary and secondary education and start making people aware, then that can then be built on at, you know, levels 3, 4, 5 and 6. And I'm reminded that about 10-15 years ago, the university sector was accused of not doing enough to support enterprise and entrepreneurship. So almost every university now will offer enterprise or entrepreneurship as either an extracurricular add-on or as part of the curriculum. You know, we all have great examples of students who are launching social enterprises. Universities, you know, have prizes, and there's lots of challenges. And you know, you can imagine that from a university perspective, if MMU have one of the 2 certified courses in carbon literacy, you know, maybe we all need to be thinking about, you know, as part of our formal education, whether it's at primary, secondary, or sort of further or higher, you know, having that carbon literacy and helping people to understand what the impacts are. I was forced to bite the bullet this week and get a helium balloon, and that annoys me no end. Helium's a finite resource. People don't think that. People don't know that. It's mined. There's only so much of it. When it stops, MRIs won't work anymore. Think about that next time you buy a helium balloon.
I am going to pause us here. I know there were
On
more
that cheery
questions.
note.
On that cheery note. No, we are going to end on a cheery note. But so, just some things that popped for me. Carbon literacy courses. I mean, some tangible ideas that we should be doing that. Other things that popped. This notion of flexibility. That push about actually, you know, are we asking the right question in the green skills, and it's all going to keep moving. This notion of actually transitioning, and it came up in a couple of places, and Carl, when you talk about at Siemens, planning. You know, we need to do a lot more planning, don't we, and transitioning. This isn't all going to happen quickly. We have to plan for it. And businesses are at different stages and different scales. And so it's not one size fits all. Should have invested already. And then here's the really, really, I think, lovely one to finish on. And it's the point that Kate particularly spoke about it, but it came up again. Young people. My 24-year-olds, your 7-year-old, young people know generally how important this is and how much we've mucked things up. So if we actually tool them up and empower them, then that leaves this, I think, on a really optimistic note. There's lots of good things happening, but actually if we can work out how to do that, that will be a really, really positive way to bridge the skills gap. Thank you so, so much to our panel. Thank you for your questions, and you've maybe even got a really, really quick loo break before the next session.